Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at how we can actually use Java to connect to an Oracle database and what it takes to actually make that happen. As you can see right here, I'm in my Oracle database demo project, so we can work with that. And we're working the controller specifically to start off with, and we'll go to the Oracle database controller so we can get those pieces together. This video is just about how we can actually build that connection, how to make those pieces happen. The first thing we always start with when we're talking about Java, of course, is our import statements. As you can see right here, I've got an import for Java.SQL, SQL exception, Java.util.vector, JOption pane, and a data.secrets.database secrets. So those are the pieces that we need to have to actually work with this to get started. And so we'll go ahead and take a look at that. Now, the database secrets, you can see over here, I have my data secrets package on the left. The data secrets package, I'm not going to expose that information at all via this video because I don't want to share that private information at all. When we're talking about a connection database, we want to make sure we're maximizing security and minimizing the exposure information that we share across that. So I'm minimizing the actual information we have for that so I can actually have that stuff in a nice private thing. I don't even include it in my repository structure. I exclude the entire directory from that as making sure that I don't have that out because we want to make sure we have a good, secure, and stable access to our database. We're trying to do good programming practices. The days of not having secure code to start off are long gone. We have to have secure code even for small, simple projects. So if we take a look at my database secrets.java file, we can see that inside that secrets, I have some secrets for hostname, Oracle SID, password, port, and username, because all those pieces of information are not necessarily public and should not be exposed when you're writing a project. And so I have those specifically set as constants that we can work with on that. I'll talk about that some more in another video, but you can see that it's exposed only as a minimal level right there inside that database secrets package. Now, we actually go take a look at the controller itself. You can see I've got a couple data members here I'm working with. I have a private string connection string and a private data frame window. We're not going to worry about the GUI side of this at all right now because we're just talking about the connection itself, but this project is going to be used for a couple different videos. You can take a look at how this project grows and how the whole thing puts together as we take a look at the entire structure as we go through this. Let's take a look at the constructor itself first to get started. So in the constructor, you can see I have a buildConnectionString method call and then the initialization of my frame that I'm working with. And so I build that connection string. Again, whenever you're talking about data, you initialize data first before you do anything else. And so I've got the connection string built. And this is where we're going to use those data secrets specifically. Let's go ahead and take a look at the buildConnectionString method. I have it extracted out to a method because I want to make it so it's very easy and doesn't take up a lot of space inside my constructor. And putting things in methods really makes things nice. And also, if I wanted to make this parameterized and make it a little bit even better, if I wanted to make it so I could connect to other databases simply by passing parameters in, I could easily use this as a base method and overload this to do even more. But we can see this.connectionString is assigned JDBC:oracle::thin. So I have my protocol that I'm working with for the actual database controller right here. So the connection string starts off with that. Then I have my database secrets.username, and then I have a slash, then database secrets.password, the @ sign, the host name, a colon, the port we're working with, and then the SID for this Oracle instance. And so that's the stuff I do to actually put that connection in. So you can have that happen. So we've got the connection string built. And so we have that right there. So now I have a connection string that actually connects to that database. And this is the structure of an Oracle connection string. Other database vendors have other patterns to work with when you're talking about a connection string. This is the one we're using specifically for this. So you have that method right there so we can build that out. We also have to pre-build our method for handleError. And so that's where we're going to be working with it. We can deal with errors inside our query. So we have that method written first before we actually call it elsewhere. And so we write that here inside our controller because it's the job of the controller to do things like handle errors, pass information back and forth. And so we have the handleError method, takes an exception error as a parameter. And I start off with the string detailed error and I assign error details to that. And then I check to see if the error that we're working with is an SQL exception, because an SQL exception has more information we actually use about the actual database itself we're working with, what happens when we have an error happen in there. And so if it is an SQL exception, I'm going to cast that exception as an SQL exception, so I get a variable SQL error I can work with on that. Then I'm going to say, hey, I want to get the original message of the error and append a new line to that. And then I also want to get the SQL state, so I can get the actual state that's assigned to the SQL. Like, what is the server state? What's it saying about itself right there when this error happens? And then I want to get the vendor-specific error code from that so I can look this up on the internet in case I have any problems. And so SQL error.getError code, so I can look that up as well. So I have all the information I could possibly need. Well, not all the information I could possibly need, but the main information I need to actually figure out what's going on, what's causing that error. And I have that as a nice little message right here I can display as a string using a pop-up window as we see right there. If it's just regular error message, I just append detailed error, the get message on that. And then I use a JOption pane show message dialog with an error message flag on that, so it shows it as an error message with that detailed error as the contents of that pop-up window. So we have the information we actually can display with that right there. So again, to start from the controller, we have our connection string, the buildConnectionString method we call inside the constructor, as well as a handleError method that we can use elsewhere inside the project in case there are any errors inside the thing. So that's what we start off with in the controller. Now in the Oracle Database Controller, we've got a bunch of imports to start off with here on this. So we have our validate VPN connection and basic database imports, and I have some query imports and job imports. We'll talk about those more as we do in the the more advanced parts of the thing, but we want to start about where we're looking for this. Now, depending on what vendor you're working with and how your server is set up, you might have different things to do to make sure you can connect to the database properly. What we're working with here in my case is I have to have a VPN connection active before I can actually make any connection to the database. So I wrote a method to check to make sure that VPN is active, so we can check that out. And then we also have to check to make sure the Oracle connection is properly maintained as well. Before we go to the details of all of our methods, you'll notice that on all these methods we have right here, they're all static methods because we want to make sure we have this handled in the most appropriate way possible. We want to minimize the exposure of the actual information and connection to the database. And we want to, because we are only accessing it in a quantifiable, just individual level, we have them as static methods because we're just accessing the data, using it, and then closing that connection. We want that to be set up explicitly for that so we have the minimal exposure of that database connection at all times. We want to reduce any security potential problems that we have, as well as having good stable code practices. And so that's why we're using static methods explicitly for all of these. You notice there's one of them is a private static method as well, and we'll talk about that more later. But these are all static methods that are referenced for this so we can minimize the exposure of the database itself as a design. So the utility methods usually should be static, and that's why we're doing that. The first thing we're going to take a look at is our testConnectedToVPN method. Now, our system we're working with requires us to be connected to VPN even to access the database first, so we have to make sure that we are correctly on that. And so in this Java application that's going to be working with this, I want to programmatically check that we actually have VPN access happening. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how that happens so we can make this work and see how this is able to use inside our project. So we have a public static boolean testConnectedToVPN. It takes a controller app reference because we have to send a reference to anything we're going to be using inside a static method as a parameter. So go ahead and open that method up. All right, so we have our testConnectedToVPN method. You can see right here I have a string positive state is it connected. So I have as a testable string I can work with. And I have a string array command, so I can have a /op/cisco/secure client/bin/VPN, which is the command I use to check the status of a VPN inside my Mac system, and then the flag I send to it, status, as the second field of that array. Then I have a try block that I'm used to actually make sure this code can operate. Because of the try block, I can't guarantee success of the code running as that happens, so I have to have it inside a try. I create a process instance called VPN check because that's what I'm doing. I'm checking the VPN, and I access the runtime of my current machine, and I'm going to execute the command that I sent right there. So I use the static get runtime method, which gives me the runtime instance to execute the command I send, in this case, the VPN space status that I'm working with on that. I then use a buffered reader to process the information from that there. I use an input stream reader to capture all that information. So I get that input stream from that, use that as the buffered reader's data source. And then I use a line variable and a contents variable to initialize to emptiness. And as long as there is something I can read that's not null, I'm going to append the contents of the reader to that line and wait for that to complete. If that, after it's all finished, if I have the positive statement, state::connected, which is the output of a connected VPN, that'll return true. However, if I don't have that, I just return false. And if there's any error, I use the app method, handleError, so I can pass that error on as, hey, this error occurred, here's what we need to do, and it just let me get past that. So this is a Boolean method because I want to make sure I have whether or not it does occur, so I have that right there. So testConnectedVPN allows me to check to see if the VPN is active. Go ahead and collapse that down. The next piece we have to check is to actually check to see if the Oracle connection is active. So we're going to check in a connection on this, and I'm going to use the controller app as a parameter as well as the connection string that we just saw built inside our controller reference as well. And so I'm going to try to make a connection. So this is a try with resources block because the connection should always be closed as soon as you're done with it. So I embed that inside a try with resources block right here. So I connection my Oracle connection, and I'm going to use the driver manager.getConnection method, which it's a static factory method that returns a connection using the supplied connection string. If I am connected, yay, it worked. I can actually test that connection. It works. I've got a valid connection string. So I can make sure that does work. If it doesn't work, of course, the error will be handled. Like so if I have an error in my connection string, that will throw an error. That exception gets caught. I can display a pop-up message to my user saying, hey, something's wrong with this. Otherwise, it'll return false if that other case happens. So that's what we've got right there for the idea of the Oracle connection. So we just looked at those Oracle database controller methods that we were going to be using to actually check to the VPN status and whether or not we can actually safely connect to that. And so we're going to actually test those out, call those methods here inside our controller. So again, we wrote them inside the Oracle database controller because they're database control related methods, but we call them inside the controller, or we're going to actually start and run all of our code for the project. And so I have my private void canYouDanceWithTheDatabase method to check that out. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So here we have our canYouDanceWithTheDatabase, and so I'm going to call those two methods. Again, it's a static method, so I use the OracleDatabaseController.testConnectedVPN, and then passing it this as a reference, and my Boolean is valid to Oracle connection, passing it the OracleDatabaseController.testOracleConnection, this and the connection string. So I'm going to call those both methods, and it'll give me back a Boolean value whether or not they're successful or not. If I am connected to the VPN, it's like, hey, my VPN connection has been validated. If I am connected to the Oracle correctly, my database string URL has been validated. So I got a couple of pop-up windows saying, yay, good job. However, If either of those return false, I don't want to proceed. I actually want to stop my execution of my program. And so if not connected to VPN or not is valid Oracle connection, I'm going to build a message I can display to the user and say, hey, this didn't work, and we're going to shut down the application because there's no use continuing on with this until I can fix those values and move on. So my string errors is going to be VPN connection, and then is connected to VPN, and then Oracle connection is valid Oracle connection, those two Boolean values, whether or not they actually worked. Then I'll use a JOption pane show message dialog, again, not connected to exiting, and then the error attached to that as a new line, and then shutting down as the title of that message, and again, showing it's an error message, and then system.exit to shut that down. So this way I can actually verify and validate my project will actually up and run as long as I'm connected. So let's go ahead and play this right now and see what happens. As you can see, I've got my first pop-up message. My VPN connection is valid. I'm actually connected to the VPN. And so great, that worked. I'm gonna go ahead and press OK to get past that. And then I have my Oracle Database Connection string URL validated. Okay, great, I've got my connection validated, so I'm actually inside my database. It was successful and it's able to work. So we're able to actually now connect this. I can get past that, and I can actually work with the actual database queries and see how that can go. I hope this is a helpful way to actually build a tested connection to a database and see how to do that. Take a look at my other videos to see how you can actually do more with that and work and do processing in your actual application, see how that works. Hope this is helpful. Cheers, see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.